Thank you very much for those questions that have been raised. And I need to express here that many of those things have been addressed in our manifesto. And among them are very serious matters that really are facing or confronting particularly our parents and our youth. Whether they be parents at the age of their 60s or maybe parents at the age of 40s or 50s, they are all facing certain difficulty challenges. And as a matter of fact, in our own analysis and in my own personal analysis, parents are basically running out of options. They are hitting a rock bottom, and they are facing a dilemma in as far as particularly what they can be able to hand over to their children as inheritance. And that's why my administration will tackle this particular issue very seriously, along with my party, the Chama cha Maslahi ya Wakenya Party. Now, the fact of the matter is simple. A vast majority of Kenyans reside in rural areas. 87% of them rely on agriculture for their income. Now, the majority of them, of course, the 70%, even more than that, have only land as their main asset. They do not have vehicles, for example. They don't have shares in companies. They don't have big businesses. So the only thing that parents have, and the only key asset that they have, is basically land, which they would hand over to their children as inheritance. But the challenge is this particular resource is basically diminishing to near zero levels. In fact, 2 out of 3 rural farmers do not believe the land they own is sufficient enough for their children to stay and live in. I have been to the whole country. I have toured Kisii, for example. I have been to Kakamega. I have been to Kwale. I have been to Kilifi. I have been to Bungoma, Busia. And I have been in Central Province. And I have been in Nakuru, for example, and Kericho and Nandi. All these areas that I have toured give a very frightening picture. It is saddening because land has been divided to almost very tiny levels, to plots like farms. If I give you an example, in my own home area in Western Kenya, in Bungoma district and the surrounding areas of Kitale, for example, many farms were either, for example, about 15 acres, 100 acres, and even as much as 1,000 acres. Today, you will be very, very lucky to have even a quarter of an acre available. At the same time, you go to all these other regions I've mentioned, in, say, for example, Kiambu, for example, in Uasin Gishu, for instance, you cannot be able to buy land, maybe 1 acre that is intact. You have either to buy small portions of 1 acre here, 1 acre there. You have traveled several kilometers to find another acre or maybe half an acre. So what is happening is that people are having patches of land which does not become, very productive, as a matter of fact. The situation is so bad that even families and neighbors are brutally fighting among themselves. They are killing one another over a mere inches or feet of land. If your land has encroached on my land, or maybe you feel that the boundary of the land is somewhere inside your land, people are fighting over that. There is no space even to bury the dead. Many of you may have seen, for example, recently, where bodies are staying in the morgue, in the mortuary, for years. There is an example of one fellow who stayed in the mortuary for 5 years because the family could not agree where he would be buried because of land shortage. So it's a huge problem. At the same time, there are some families that are living in a graveyard. You go, for example, in a place like Kakamega, for instance. You find people there are living in graveyards, in cemeteries, because they don't have land. Now, much land that were huge in the 1960s, in the 1970s, in 1980s, have all been subdivided. And you go to areas that had huge land, today they are kind of villages, composed of houses as opposed to farmlands. What's more, our fathers and mothers are old, yet there is nothing to show of their hard labor. With no other wealth, our fathers and mothers are passing over tiny lands to their children, thus smaller wealth than what they had when they were younger. This is creating an explosive situation that is awaiting us. Now, what do you have to pass over to your child or children, for example? This is why I have prepared one of the most advanced economic and social programs that will rescue our youth, will rescue our parents, and also our children, so that they don't get down the bad path, they don't spiral down to total economic absence. My rural and agricultural programs that I have prepared will transform our poverty-stricken peasantry farmers, for example, and those who have very little land, into money-minting ventures and enterprises. My government will deploy, for example, an organizational framework that rewards peasant farmers, linking them, for example, with all available opportunities at the national level, at the regional level, and at the international level, which guarantees them sufficient incomes that puts dignity at the heart of their labor and, of course, their life. That is what, unfortunately, Jubilee, CORD, Amani, Eagle coalitions, and those other leaders that we have heard before will always be unable to do for you, as they have not done so during the peak moments of their power.